Welcome to the Book and You podcast alongside Dr. Tim Elmore. My name is Jared Cagle. Today, we're going to talk to you about this topic that a lot of you have been asking about. What do you do when you are stuck in your writing process? Tim, I'm excited to dive into this today. We've been listening to our audience, and this is a hot topic, how to get unstuck. It happens to all of us, doesn't it?
It does. It's not an IQ problem. It's not a gender problem. It's not, do you live in America or wherever? It's a human condition problem. Jared, you remember the very first Book in a Weekend retreat we did, and then we did a second one. Everybody at the retreat to kick off the whole year is excited. In fact, they're thinking, I will not get stuck. I'm so inspired. But then time happens and distractions happen and other priorities happen. And within 3 or 4 months of the beginning of that writing project, we're almost all stuck. In fact, we do these monthly calls and they say, oh my gosh, what do I do? So I thought it would be good, and you and I both agreed it would be good if we could just talk through what are some ideas when we get stuck to get unstuck.
This is a great example, too, when you get a bunch of authors in the room. And what's exciting to see from the Book in a Weekend that we've done a couple of times now is, you know, these things that you may expect to be easy, you see other people struggling with the same thing, which is good, right? It's hard, but it's hopeful that we're not alone. You have several strategies that you've thought through, and I'd love for you to go ahead and start getting into the content that we've prepared today.
Yeah, well, the two hurdles that I think we need to jump first before we get to like little strategies, I think we all struggle with two common obstacles. One is a term that psychologists use, pluralistic ignorance. We get stuck in this thought of I alone am the idiot. You know, I alone am the one that isn't writing and flowing, and everybody else is doing well, and they're going to write a best-selling book, and I won't even have my book out. So this is just, the world is lonely, a lonely place. And whenever you're trying to do something that seems hard, you feel like you're alone. It's just not true. Listeners, hear me out. You're not alone. You're one of 99.9% of the human race who's trying to write a book and get stuck. The second one that gets in our way, though, is perfectionistic tendencies. Some of you listening are perfectionists. You want to get the book perfect, and that's a natural yearning, a natural desire. But you know this, perfectionism is paralyzing. In fact, nobody is perfect. So unless you are perfect, you're going to fail at this perfection thing. So I just love our founder's, John Maxwell's phrase, you got to fail forward. So you're going to fail, expect to fail, and stop that perfect thing from taking over your brain, and just know this is part of the hurdles I got to jump in this race.
And you may be out there too as an author, a writer, and you may be saying, well, it's easier said than done. We understand the struggle. We understand the struggle with thinking you're alone, but also thinking that you have to be perfect. I love that those two are what we're starting with here, these two obstacles.
Yeah. I want everyone to know that you're not alone. So, Jared, I want to use a metaphor before we jump into some specific steps that our listeners can jot down or make mental notes of. We've all watched movies in our past and seen at least one scenario in that movie where there's quicksand, right? And some of us have actually seen it. I've been in countries where there is quicksand, and we've been warned, well, don't walk over here. You're gonna fall into it. But quicksand is that weird part of planet Earth where if you fall into it, you get stuck. It grips you. And we've all heard, when you get stuck in quicksand, don't try to fight your way out of it. You'll go deeper. In fact, what the best thing to do is relax a little bit and then try to have somebody pull you out. So today, listeners, I'm saying relax a little bit, stop fighting this stuck thing, and let Jared and I kind of pull you out of the quicksand. That's my metaphor for this recording.
I love it.
So I'll just jump in, Jared, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The very first step I would take is a mental one, not a physical one, but it's celebrate micro progress. So sometimes we get stuck because we're saying, well, success for me is writing a book. Well, yeah, ultimately. But what if you said, success for me today is writing 300 words? I get one page done. And I literally celebrate internally. Or maybe I do actually, maybe I have a glass of wine or something, but somehow I've got to find a way to celebrate the wins. Something happens to us psychologically when we start putting wins under our belt. We feel momentum. So this is the mindset that empowers you to celebrate progress and keep moving forward. Quality and quantity time go together. If you do quantity and you get a lot of little micro wins, you'll eventually get quality. I mean, I'll write a whole bunch of pages before I get one really good one. So I need to just write a whole bunch of pages that are bad. So celebrate micro progress. That would be number one. The second one that I would, and by the way, Jared, feel free to hop in here. You've got good stuff to share. But my second one that helps me is write to clarify. Write to clarify. So the reason schools, K-12 schools, teach writing to kids is not to generate endless essays on history or books, create a bunch of best-selling authors. That's not going to happen. But listen to me, we're in a day of AI, aren't we? And the kids are picking up on AI quicker than the adults are. So by delegating writing to AI, our kids might reduce their time spent doing homework, but they'll miss the chance to think more clearly about a topic on hand. So sometimes you just got to start typing. You know it's not going to be published. You don't have any, delusions of grandeur, but you're typing to clarify, and you'll get clearer and clearer and clearer. And pretty soon, maybe a page and a half, 2 pages in, now you're flowing. But at first, you're just clarifying, not producing a Pulitzer Prize winning book. Okay.
Oh, I love this too, Tim. For those of you out there that are verbal processors and it's laborious to sit down and actually write it out, I want to encourage you to test this muscle.
Yeah.
And even if it's just talking to your phone, or we've talked about this before, voice recording is your friend, right? So, but that's what it's the same concept. As you flesh out these ideas and get these words out into the world, into the universe, then you begin to clarify those ideas, whether you're writing them down or speaking them into a note, but then eventually getting them into word form, whether it's transcripting your verbal processing through a voice recorder or not. This is a great point, Tim.
I love the fact that you brought that up, because some people are going to do better not writing, but voicing their thoughts. So number 3 is give yourself a lifeline. So I have used a phrase for years that's been helpful to me. Deadlines are lifelines.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is sometimes I'll meander through on my way to a goal, but I keep putting it off and putting it off. But once there's a deadline set, it becomes a lifeline to get that project done. So here's where I would caution you. Don't just set an arbitrary deadline. Oh, January 30th. Okay. Because it's not really real. That wasn't real after all. So-and-so came up and now I've got this real thing going on. I would say make sure they're real, but put dates on that's almost like an appointment with someone in your calendar. Almost you need to imagine or pretend you're going to meet with so-and-so on this date and they want that chapter done. When you do that, you're going to find that energy comes, because our brains tend to work like this. Deadlines are indeed lifelines. It pushes you forward.
Totally agree.
Number 4, the fourth strategy I would give you is change up where and when you write. So this has helped me along the way. I sit in this very place I'm sitting right now, Jared, and it's in my little upstairs office. And I just have grown accustomed to this. But sometimes I'm so familiar with it, I'm stuck. Nothing fresh is coming to me. Nothing new is popping into my mind. So I'll change up where I write. And maybe when I write. Oftentimes morning is the best time for me to write. Sometimes, this week I got up in the wee hours of the morning, like 3:30, and I did some great writing, I think, during that period of time. So Winston Churchill said it best. Change is as good as rest. In other words, when you just change up what you're doing, it's like resting your brain, or at least part of your brain. So I would say change it up, find a new place, a new time, follow Winston Churchill's advice, make it different, and you'll be amazed how it might just all of a sudden there's a flood of ideas coming to you because you did it differently.
Wow. change is as good as rest, and
Yeah,
specifically in the context of getting your mind going,
yeah,
writing, preparing. I guess that's what he means, right? He's
yes,
specifically talking about this kind. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. Well, Winston Churchill was a workaholic, and we're better for it, but it was not always healthy. And so he knew sometimes I just need to play with my dog, or I need to read a book, or I need to do this, that, or the other.
That's
And
great.
sometimes that just helps the cobwebs get out of our head. So here's the next one. Act now and do something. So in another podcast recording, we're going to talk about priming the pump, and we'll get to that in another conversation. But there's something about just do something.
Mm.
And so that's really what I'm going for here. One of my favorite stimulants for writing is to jot something down in the moment I get the idea streaking across my mind. Nolan Bushnell said this, and I'm going to quote him. I'm going to read it from a notes here. Everyone who's taken a shower has had a good idea, but it's the person that gets out of the shower, drives off, and does something about it that makes the difference in the world. Don't you love that? So we have ideas in the shower, laying in our bed, wherever we are. But I'm saying to you, take advantage. If an idea hits you in the middle of the night, I don't know if this is wise or not, according to doctors, but I get up and I jot something down, even if I just type 2 sentences. But it moves me, and now I'm flowing again. Sometimes, well, we've all heard the advice: first things first, right? That's just good, sound wisdom. Do the most highest priority first. Sometimes I find it's better to do quick things first. Do the quick thing that you can get done. And now I got momentum going. I'm not stuck anymore. So I believe this is just a leader hack or a writer hack. Do the quick things first. And now you feel like, ooh, I'm moving here. And you kind of celebrate yourself and you get going.
Oh,
Um,
Tim, double click on that right there. Quick things first for
yeah,
momentum as a writing hack. That's
yeah.
incredible.
And you know what this means is that means you might be driving along the road and you pull off to the side of the road, put it in park, and write that idea down. Middle of the night, it might be that. It might be you're talking into your phone when I've paused meetings with my team and said, excuse me, just for a moment. And somebody said, you going to the restaurant? No, I'm going to write down a thought. And they laugh at me like I'm some sort of knucklehead. And I am. But I'm telling you, folks, seize the day.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one. Follow a template. Sometimes we get stuck when we're starting to write that next chapter and there's this blank white digital document in front of us and it's overwhelming because there's zero written down. But what if you had a template for those chapters? Let me give you an example. Right now, Jared, you and I've talked a million times about this new Gen Z book I'm working on. I'm very excited about it. I'm becoming an advocate for the youngest generation of employees coming into the workforce. But I've got a template for my solution strategies. And my template is I'm going to start with a dilemma, give the research behind why this is a dilemma and what we need to do, and then illustrate with a great employer or manager that actually helped a Gen Z employee get out of that mess or solve that problem. So I already know my template and I already know, okay, what I need here is this. I need a quote here. I need a story here. That template really, really, really helps me. I don't feel paralyzed at the beginning of the job. Now, when I blog, listeners, I may have shared this before, but I blog a gob. I'm writing more than an article a week, sometimes 2 or 3. But let me tell you why I can. It's not because I'm brilliant. I have a little template when I write an article or a blog. Give them a story, give them a study, give them a step. What I mean by that is I usually lead with a really interesting story that everybody goes, ooh, I didn't know that. Then I give the research, the study behind why this happens or what the behavioral science is behind this little something. And then I want to give them an action step they can take. That can be done in 400 words, 1 page, or maybe 800 words, 2 pages. But I'm not paralyzed at the beginning because I already know my template. So find a template, create a template to write more. All right, one last idea, Jared. The final idea I have for you is form a peer review panel. So we all know that people tend to do better when they have accountability, right? I like to say it this way. I always look better when someone's watching me. Okay, so I always write better when I know I'm about to give this to somebody, whether it's my assistant, Melissa, or my wife, Pam, or Jared, it might be you. Invite some people that you really admire and trust and respect. They don't
Yeah.
have to be authors, but you respect their brain. And
Yeah.
say, I will get this to you on the 31st of this month. So there's the Lifeline. And then when you know that they're going to read it, you just write better. Jared, I'm telling you, when I know I'm going to talk to John Maxwell about something, I'm better in that meeting. I'm telling you, I'm just better. All my senses are heightened because I know this guy is a brilliant man and he's going to have 1,000 questions. So find that review panel and invite them into your life. These ideas, I think, at least one of them, is going to help you get unstuck. So my question for you, I guess, as I wrap up my thoughts is, which of these ideas we've just talked about sounds most relevant to help you get unstuck?
I love the one you just unpacked, Tim, with a peer review panel. And you've talked about this before, dancing with your enemies.
Yeah.
I think that's so fascinating. Like
Yeah.
there's going to be, well, being comfortable with those who disagree with you and
Yeah.
learning from their perspective, dancing with them is going to only refine what
That's
you're
right.
putting on paper.
It really does. Yeah. I know this has been said 1,000 times, but if you don't get around people, you won't be polished. And if you get around people that are just thinking like you're in an echo chamber. You don't have any new, fresh thoughts. You get around people that are call them enemies, call them adversaries, call them people that just make you better. You're just going to get better. And I feel like that has been true for my life. If there's any growth at all, it's been because there's friction, and I try to make the most of that friction. Yeah.
I'll tell you what might be the most important. I'll answer your question for me. I'd love for our listeners to answer that question too. Hey, which one of these impacts you the most and what are you going to apply? For me, I think celebrating the micro
Yeah.
progress is, and that was your first one of today, but that's something that I need to get better at myself. I think about writers and authors like Valerie Burton, who says, hey, math is your friend. Simplify it down. How many words? Is it 400 words a day?
Yeah.
Is it 300? Is it 500? How many words can you commit to? And that's a micro progress. But then when you add up all the days, you're going to have a book. And celebrating those, right? Like none of us are Ernest Hemingway. Like we're not going to sit down and have this beautiful, from day one. So it comes in chunks, and those chunks sometimes are smaller, but that's okay. Celebrate those as you go.
Absolutely. Do you mind if I fire back kind of a closing
Please.
story? You just reminded me of it. Way back in the 1980s, when I was a young professional and working under John Maxwell in San Diego, I got to meet Chuck Swindoll. So if you're a listener, you don't recognize that name. Chuck Swindoll was an incredible pastor and best-selling author. I mean, New York Times best-selling author.
Oh, yeah.
But I grabbed him early one morning before an event, and I said, Chuck, could I ask you a question? How do you crank out so much writing? How do you write so many books? And he said, Tim, here's what I found that works for me. He said, I get up at least a half hour before the rest of my family, and I will write 30 minutes every day. And I will stop after 30 minutes. And then I'm greeting my kids or my wife, I'm getting coffee, whatever, and the hustle and bustle of the day begins. But he said, I have found I can write a page and a half in 30 minutes. He said, you add 365 days in a year, you got at least a book, if not more. But I love how he broke it down into micro wins, micro goals, and then he would celebrate. I say to myself, if I get a page written, I get some popcorn. I love popcorn, and so I reward myself with a bucket of popcorn. I'm going to get fat along the way, but I'm going to have a good book. So anyway, I'll stop there. But listeners, celebrate those micro wins, and you'll find there's a big win coming sooner or later.
What a wonderful point. What a wonderful lesson. Listeners, we're grateful that you've hung with us all the way through. We'd love to hear your feedback. Let us know what you're looking to learn, what you'd like for us to cover. We are adding value to you because we believe that you can multiply that value to others. And as you're developing yourself as a writer, as an author, we believe these thoughts right here, these takeaways will help you get unstuck in that process. So until next time, the world needs the book in you.